I wasn't going to talk about class, but I was thinking in terms of entrenched privilege and existing formats and routines and protocols for expressing your dissidence. I mean, it was a very naughty thing to do in many ways. Or did it not feel that way?
I have maybe a different spin on it. I think what I was talking about in my introduction was that in our generation, we hadn't been brought up in a normal British world. There'd been the Second World War, so we didn't know how we should behave. There weren't those rules weren't laid out. We didn't have to be rebels because it was that. Well, we didn't have to be polite schoolboys, and I think that helped us. And the mood of the time. I mean, if you look at something totally different, the beginning of lots of magazines at the time. And funnily, the end of some magazines like Picture Post. Picture Post ended, but the colour supplements started in that period. And I think we, not consciously, but subconsciously, didn't feel we were restrained in what we might do. And, well, you've seen the sort of controlled chaos of today's presentation. We've always related like that. And, there's always somebody throwing something up in the air, and then one of the others is sort of dashing around trying to catch it, and and you don't have time to stop to think about the rules when you're involved in that sort of excitement.
I've just remembered something which is a personal anecdote, but might flesh out the last bit of conversation in a funny way. The second day I was a student at the AA, having come up from Bournemouth. All the smart people were going that evening to hear a lecture about Boise. I didn't want to know about Boise, I'd come from bloody Bournemouth. But there was a funny, fat Italian Scot who gave a chat in the restaurant, in a little tiny bit of restaurant, to about 5 people, and had 400 slides, mostly of Mickey Mouse. Of course, it was Palazzi. And that's what I'd come to London about. And I think that sort of, if you knew where to look, if you had a particular taste, the seeds of Archigram lay, or my seeds of Archigram lay in those places. There were precedents if you knew where to look. And my God, that was audacious. But the smart people were going to hear about Boise. Interesting. Had an audience 50 times larger than the one for Palazzi. There's always been those two sides to the culture.
I mean, it's something you said about the meticulousness of attention to the detail of the base in order that the superstructure can be liberated and imaginative. Mm. And that's quite unusual, isn't it? It's not part of other European avant-gardes. It doesn't have that kind of range from the rivet to the,
I don't know, I mean, I sort of always, I can't speak for the others in this, but I always felt myself as a somnambulist, a sleepwalker, who had to do it, there was no choice. And meeting up with this guy and these guys, enabled one to eke out a living to support the habit. And there was never any questioning, because you have to do something in your life, and you either meet Peter or you meet a rich widow or something, or you enter the church.
You try for both.
If you can do both.
To varying degrees, I was taught by every one of Archigram, including the 2 that aren't here. Therefore, I'm sort of erstwhile product of youth to a certain extent. And it's certainly true that when I applied to architecture school, I only applied to the AA. I didn't apply anywhere else, because if I didn't get in there, I was going to go and do sculpture, if they would have me too. But I did that, and actually Peter was my 5th year tutor, although curious enough, he's the only one I never had a tutorial with. I never saw him, because I went away somewhere. But to me, there was a great change, and you can ask the question, I might like to answer it there, that because they're self-confessed people, or set of people that were interested in technology and the effects that that might have, and exploring what that might mean, a lot of that technology at the time came from the USA. that eyes were looking west. And then somewhere, I don't know, around about 1971, 72, say, suddenly mainland Europe became sort of interesting in a funny sort of uninteresting way. And that changed things. And I sometimes often wonder whether if Archigram had continued, say, to, well, I'm so sure you've been asked many times whether you've built, say, Monte Carlo or whatever, what might have happened. I wonder what might have happened, you know, because we can certainly see what happened here with that sort of shift towards a more Europeanized rather than Americanized, is that we became sort of saddled with hedgehog and moron, you know, and sort of materiality and things like that. It's a very, very different conversation, and you can say today very much the conversation is related to the nature of the object. There's a certain architectonic element to it. Many of the things that you were exploring, and continue to a certain extent, have become less relevant, although I find it curious at the moment that there is another generation which is actually rediscovering what you were doing. But it was certainly that east-west thing which I thought was a significant shift in somewhere in the early 70s. And people like Mike, of course, never came back. Nice to see you. It wasn't really a question.
The things that we were dreaming about in the 60s, in many instances, now come to pass. And what you were always about was looking at the front edge of things. And that still seems to be the most interesting thing to do. And I think, therefore, what are you going to do next? Is the question.
Well,
What are we all
I'm
going to do
sorry,
next?
Mike, it's not, you know, I've got to get it here. It hasn't come to pass. It exactly hasn't, has it?
Oh, it has.
No, it hasn't. No,
You haven't
Madrid
noticed it,
Airport
though.
is a huge, great, bloody lumbering
I agree.
bit of
Absolutely. That's
stone
not-
metal. It'll be there in bloody
Absolutely.
50 years' time.
Not a word. Not
So
an
it hasn't come to pass.
It has.
That none of
It's come to pass in the
our
past.
projects has come to pass.
It's come to pass in the mobile phones. It's come to pass in the past.
But not in architecture.
It's come.
has
Well,
it?
that's irrelevant. It's not what
No,
it's
it's
about.
not.
I
I
think
mean,
that-
I know everybody I've known has been says it's the most beautiful building and it's a beautiful space. You know, so I can't.
Well, I think the most important thing about that particular project is it's driven by the reference that Mike made earlier, which is, I think it is to do with the program, as the Americans call it, it's to do with the brief, and not really to do with the form. Despite the fact that last night all these projects were not celebrated with the form as anything else, it's actually about performance, and that's the thing I'm interested in. That's why I did Yekam 30 years ago in Paris. That room is still the most high performance room on the planet in acoustic terms.
Yes, I mean the thing about Pompidou Centre was not only its architecture, but was the way it was created with the programme, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It created a new kind of museum. You know,
It was a new way of thinking about participating.
Yes.
15% of the population
I-
went to the Musée du Louvre and the Palais de Tokyo, and in Pompidou everybody goes there, not just that select 15%. That's what it was about. It was about popularising access to things that previously were elitist, and that's its most interesting thing, and it's endured pretty well. I was incredibly embarrassed, as was Chris. I remember when we went there after a year of working on Pompidou, we said, Jesus Christ, what are we doing? We're doing a building. We come from desert stuff and suits and inflatables and funny wagons and air-conditioned gypsydom. And there we were in Paris doing sort of steel and concrete building. It was sort of embarrassing.
But
really.
then, do you? I mean, I just have one more. Is that I'm not being a nuisance. Do you think? It's a sort of interesting by-water archigram that has had absolutely zilch effect on anything.
Well, let's put it this way.
Can I interrupt?
You've had an enormous effect on me.